not a huge fan of series. I don't actively avoid them or anything, but I also don't actively seek them out. I have this thing where I like the books I read to be self-contained and satisfying in and of themselves without me having to read multiple other books to complete character arcs or plot points. I'm a simple gal, and I like to be able to jump around, read lots of different things, read different genres, read about different concepts, explore different thematic content, and I feel like getting stuck into a series, especially a long one, can start to feel a little boring to me. To be fair, I do have ADHD, so that could be a factor. But still, I'm not the biggest series person. But again, like I said, I don't actively avoid series. I do start them relatively often. I am not great about finishing them though. And that's what this video is attempting to fix. Basically, I have in the past year or two started 4 series where the first book I absolutely loved. I gave it 5 stars. It made my heart happy or break and disintegrate in pain. Sometimes both. And I've been putting off reading the sequels in these series because I have this tendency to have really high hopes for a sequel of a book that I gave 5 stars. And I feel like more often than not, authors let me down, especially with the second book in a trilogy. I feel like they just tend to really drop the ball and be quite boring. But today I'm going to start a brand new reading challenge, and I'm going to be picking up the sequels to 4 books that I loved and giving them a read, seeing if they live up to the hype that I've built in my own head. Also, hi, I'm Elizabeth, if you're new here. I love to read. I talk about books on my channel quite a bit. If you also like those things, and I imagine you do if you clicked on this video, then feel free to subscribe and stay a while. We would love to have you. So let me introduce you to the 4 books that I previously read and loved, and their 4 sequels that I'm going to be reading in this video. Starting with Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell and the sequel, Ocean's Echo. I read this or listened to it via audiobook maybe 2 years ago now, I can't quite recall, and I absolutely loved it. It's sci-fi, it has amazing world building, there is a gay relationship at the center that melted my heart. I loved the characters, I loved the world, I found the political intrigue really compelling, so I was a big fan, and I ended up buying a physical copy after I listened to the audiobook because I loved it so much. So this one is one of my few read books that has not been annotated, but I have owned this sequel since maybe a couple months after I read the original. When I bought the first one, I also bought the second one because I knew I would want to read it, and I've just been putting it off, and I don't know why, because I imagine I'm going to love it. I hope I will. Next up, we have Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón and the sequel, The Angel's Game. I read this book for my Reading Around the World reading vlog, which I will link in the description box if you want to check it out. And I really, really loved it. It's 1940s Barcelona. There's a little bit of magic, a little bit of a fantastical quality to it. Definitely feels very dark and moody and atmospheric, has a bit of a dark academia vibe to it. I really, really loved it. And I loved it so much that I bought every other book in the series. I think there's 3 or 4 I could count, but I'm too lazy. But I have, again, been putting off reading the sequel, mostly just because I'm worried it won't be as amazing as the first one, but I'm finally going to do it. I'm really excited to read this. I hope I haven't forgotten too many of the relevant plot points, but I did tab this one, so I might be able to sort of skim a little bit if I need to. Although it's really cool to look at this because this is from before I started annotating with a key. So I was just tabbing in like pretty color order and not specifically using a color to mean a specific thing. So I actually have no idea what each and every one of these tabs is marking, which is why I changed to a more efficient tabbing system that used a key. I'll link my annotations video if you want more about that, because that's not the point of this video, but it does look really pretty. It's just not nearly as useful. So Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón is the second book for this video. Next up, we have Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler and the sequel, Parable of the Talents. This was a book club pick, and this was definitely one of the heart-wrenching variety, one of the making me cry and feel immense despair variety, but it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It had such interesting things to say about the structure of our society and our lack of foresight when it comes to climate change and rampant capitalism. It's really, really good. Once again, I have been waiting a while to read the sequel, although in the case of this book, it was less so being worried that I wouldn't love the sequel, because I'm almost certain, I'm like 99% sure that I'm going to love this. I have loved everything I've ever read by Octavia E. Butler, but mostly because I was so absolutely emotionally destroyed by this book that I needed several working months to recover so I could dive in again, because I imagine the sequel will be just as heart-wrenching. But I'm excited. These editions are so gorgeous. I can't get over how beautiful this artwork is. It's absolutely stunning. Last but not least, we have The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I love this book. This was yet another book club pick. So fantastic. High fantasy, sapphic representation, a really cool magic system, and some really interesting, compelling world building, layered characters, really complex relationships between characters, which is like candy for me. I eat it up. This was also something I read before I really started annotating. So this book, which is about 800 pages long, has maybe 10 tabs, which is honestly mind-blowing, because in my current state, I would have more than 10 tabs in a book that had less than 10 pages. So you can really tell that it's been a while since I read the first one. To be fair with this one, when I read the first book, the second one hadn't come out yet, but it has been out for a while now. So I think we finally entered dropping the ball category. But the sequel is the absolutely massive A Day of Fallen Night, and that might be part of why I've put this one off. Even though I pre-ordered it and have had it on my shelves for a while, it's just massive, and I thought the first one was big. I'm going to develop biceps just by holding these up, but I am very, very excited for this. I loved the first one, as I loved all the first books in this video. That's the whole concept, and I'm really excited for the second one. I am a bit nervous about reading a book that is, once again, approaching the 900-page mark, and the pages are bigger. I'm always a little intimidated by the prospect of reading a doorstopper, but I already know that I love this world. It has been a minute since I read the original, so hopefully I don't forget too many of the intricate details of the world building, again, because I did not thoroughly annotate the first book. So many benefits to annotating, especially if you put off reading the sequels for years, like I do. But very excited to read this one. So those are the 4 books I'm going to be reading for this video. My general plan for this video is to do a check-in for each book at the midway point and then also at the end. And I'll be doing both spoiler-free and spoiler reactions and reviews for each of them. The spoilers will be clearly marked, so don't you worry your little head. You will not be spoiled if you don't want to be spoiled. I'm so excited for this video, both because I will feel accomplished having read the sequels to 4 books on my list, getting through 4 of the books in my physical TBR, but also because I just have a good feeling that I'm really gonna love all 4 of these books. At least I hope I will. So get cozy, grab a warm drink, maybe a blanket, and hang out with me while I read these 4 sequels and give you my thoughts and feelings, of which I always have many. After hemming and hawing here for a couple minutes, I've decided I'm going to start with The Angel's Game. I think it's a good kind of middle ground in terms of the vibes. Very technical. Hopefully it hasn't been so long since I read the first one that I can just jump right in without any confusion, but we shall see. Okay, so I've just gotten to the halfway point of the Angels game, so I'm going to share my thoughts with you. I'll do a spoiler-free section, and then I'll do a spoiler section, everything clearly marked. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you about today's video sponsor, Kitsch. Kitsch is a female-owned brand, and they're all about creating beauty and wellness products, hair care, and accessories that can help anyone, no matter your hair type, style, or budget. I've been on the hunt for the past 6 months to a year for a new shampoo and conditioner because my hair is a bit temperamental and it's never really fully adjusted to how dry the climate is out here. And since moving, my hair has been super dry, super staticky and frizzy. It's been really difficult to take care of. I've either had to use really hydrating products that keep my hair from being super frizzy, and then my hair looks greasy by the end of the day because it's so fine, or I use things that are a little more lightweight, not quite as hydrating, and my hair is just sticking out in all directions, super staticky, super frizzy all the time. It's been a bit of a nightmare. But I am happy to say that I found a shampoo and conditioner that have been working for me, and it's honestly been such a relief. For the past month, I've been using exclusively my Kitsch rice water shampoo and conditioner bars. These solid bars are formulated with rice water to help repair damaged hair follicles and prevent split ends. They cleanse and condition your hair and scalp to encourage overall hair length and density. Kitsch rice water shampoo and conditioner are free of phthalates, parabens, silicones, and sulfates. Their solid form is meant to help reduce single-use plastic, so they help your hair and the environment. The rice water shampoo and conditioner are formulated to help with strengthening your hair. So if you're someone who deals with breakage and split ends, I know I do, my hair is so fine and fragile, this shampoo and conditioner is for you. They have ingredients that help in the regeneration of hair to help with hair growth. They also have protein to help strengthen your hair, which reduces breakage and improves your hair's texture. They're also formulated to rebalance the moisture of your hair, which is definitely something I needed dealing with an oily scalp and dry ends in such a dry environment. I needed something that would give me enough moisture without weighing my hair down so much, over-hydrating it so much that it looks greasy on the first day. In the past month of using the rice water bars, I feel like I've noticed a difference in the strength of my hair. Normally, I'd be noticing a lot of breakage all the way down the shaft of my hair, and while I still notice a little bit, and my hair is always going to be really fine and fragile, so I don't think I can avoid that altogether, it definitely seems like there is less breakage. My hair feels a little bit fuller, and I'm not noticing quite as much hair fall after the shower. By far, the biggest difference I've noticed, though, is how well it hydrates my hair without weighing it down. I feel like my hair looks nice for 2 to 3 days, which is honestly unheard of for my hair. If you have fine hair with an oily scalp, you know what I'm talking about. The rice water shampoo and conditioner doing some kind of magic on my hair, because while it definitely starts to get a little bit greasier on my scalp by day 3, actually looks nice for all of day 2, which is something I thought I could only dream of. It's also doing such a good job of keeping my hair more hydrated, so it's not super staticky in this dry winter air. I've also felt like my scalp has been happier the last month. I do tend to have a bit of a sensitive scalp. It gets itchy and irritated pretty easily, but it's felt really calm and just neutral in the past month. I love storing my Kitsch shampoo and conditioners on the Kitsch shower caddy in my shower. It's a really great way to keep them within easy reach, away from the stream of water, and also allow them to get lots of airflow so they can fully dry out in between uses. I'm really impressed by how nicely the shampoo and conditioner lather up, and I'm someone who loves a good lather. I like to really feel that my hair is getting clean. I highly recommend Kitsch's mesh bags that you can buy for the shampoo and conditioner. Not only are they labeled and different colors, so it's really easy to remember which is which, but they noticeably increase how much lather you can get and how easily you can get the lather going. And I personally really enjoyed using them. I didn't expect them to make as much of a difference as they did, but I would definitely highly recommend the mesh bags if you're going to try out the solid shampoo and conditioner, especially if you're a big fan of lather like I am. I've been really impressed using my Kitsch products for the past month. I'm definitely going to keep using them. I'm really curious to find out for myself how long they last, especially with the amount of conditioner I typically use to condition all this hair. I think I may have found my new holy grail shampoo and conditioner, which is amazing because I'm so sick of trying shampoos and conditioners that don't work for me and then having to go through the whole bottle so I don't waste it. it, even though it does nothing for my hair. It's the worst. Because Kitsch is sponsoring this video, you can click the link in my description box and or use my code to get 25% off your first order. Kitsch ships within the US and internationally to over 27 countries. They also have a subscription option which you can sign up for an even better discount. Thank you again to Kitsch for sponsoring this video, and thank you again for helping me find my new holy grail shampoo and conditioner. I was really starting to lose hope there for a minute. So The Angel's Game, I'm halfway through. I'm enjoying this so far. I definitely set myself up for failure a little bit by waiting so long since I read the first book because I forgot a lot of the details. And so if there are links between the first one and this one, if there are characters in common, I'm probably not picking up on that because it's been so long since I read the first one. But regardless, even treating this as more of a standalone that just carries forward some of the thematic content, same setting, some of the same mystical or supernatural elements as the first. I'm really enjoying this. I find David Martin, our protagonist, quite interesting to follow. I find him pretty entertaining. He has a very sort of dry, witty, sarcastic sense of humor, which I definitely enjoy and can relate to. Relatively recently, he's started interacting with this young woman, teenager on the cusp of womanhood, Isabella, who is the daughter of a grocer in his neighborhood who wants to be a writer and is, trying to weasel her way into Martine's life as his assistant. And I'm really enjoying their dynamic. It's really funny. She is very quick-witted and sarcastic and funny and very willful and knows what she wants and how to get it. And Martine is just a little bit overwhelmed by her energy, and he keeps being bowled over by her enthusiasm and how quickly she's able to switch tacks to find a new way to convince him that he definitely needs her as an assistant. It's a really cute and funny dynamic, and I hope that continues because I'm really enjoying that so far. I would love to see that sort of grow and develop over the course of the novel, because other than that dynamic, Martine has had some really bad luck, and he has a lot of friendships and relationships with different characters that maybe started off well, but started to sour. And I just kind of feel bad for Martine. He's very lonely. His life isn't going the way he wants it to go. And I want him to have a friend and find joy. So I'm enjoying his dynamic with Isabella. That's sort of the most recent development in terms of his personal connections, and I'm really liking that. I am enjoying the mystery quality. This one character who is very mysterious. We don't know who he is or what he really wants and how he is doing what he's doing. He's this very mysterious and slightly menacing character, and I'm really fascinated by this character. I'm really interested to see how his story is going to develop and what is going to be revealed about who he really is and what he really wants, why he's doing what he's doing. He wants Martine to essentially create a religion, which is really interesting. And so far they've had one or two philosophical discussions about religion that I'm finding really fascinating. As an atheist who was raised Christian, I find discussions of religion from a sort of theoretical standpoint, or more of a generalized view of religion as a whole, and not an individual religion, but all religions. What do they share in common? What is the purpose of religion? Why has humanity come back to religion again and again throughout our existence? What is that draw? And I think, especially as someone who believed and found comfort in that belief, in that faith, to growing into someone who, I understand why people are religious. I understand the appeal of religion. I understand the benefits people feel that they get from religion, what it is that people are seeking when they look for religion. I just personally don't get the same things from it. So it's interesting from that more analytical point of view to assess religion, and that's kind of the point of view of their conversations. They both seem to not be religious, and so they're talking about religion in this very academic way, in a very removed way, which I find fascinating. So I'm really liking that as well. Of course, I'm not surprised because the first book was a masterclass in dark academia, atmospheric, gothic, sort of almost film noir-esque atmosphere. And this book continues in that vein. It has a very strong gothic, dark, moody atmosphere. There's always something a little mysterious, a little unsettling, a little eerie about the buildings and the streets. I love the setting of Barcelona in this time period, and I love how Zafon really creates this almost oppressive sense of the setting, of the atmosphere of this city. It feels like you're there, like you can smell it. You can smell the sort of mildew in the old walls of Martine's home. You can smell the smoke, wafting out of a bar as you pass it on the street at night. It really has that atmospheric quality, which I just absolutely adore. It's something that I am a sucker for, and I loved that aspect of the first book so much, and I'm really glad that we're getting it again here. There's definitely a little bit of a possibly supernatural mystery at the core of this book, and I'm really curious to see what direction that's going to go in. I have some theories, I have some ideas about what might be happening, but I feel like it could go in so many different directions, and I'm really intrigued and excited to see where Zafon takes it. So I'm really liking this so far. I would say the only small caveat is that there have been a couple moments, not a lot, but there have been a couple moments where it feels like female characters are being objectified in a way that feels a little heavy-handed, maybe a little unnecessary, but it's certainly possible that that is more of a commentary on the characters and on Martine especially, and how he views women and sort of where he's at in his emotional development and in his interactions with women than it is, a viewpoint that the book itself holds. So I'm not really drawing any kind of conclusion from that so far, but I am taking note of it. I do have a tab just to mark instances of objectification of women or misogyny. I've only used a couple so far, but just something that I'm taking note of. But yeah, just loving the writing style, loving the mysterious quality, the atmosphere, and finding the characters quite funny. I'm chuckling a lot as I read because there's a lot of really entertaining back and forths between different characters. And I feel like Zafon is really good at writing snappy, natural feeling dialogue that has really nice pacing to it, really nice flow, and that is quite humorous and tongue-in-cheek, which I enjoy. So that's my spoiler-free update for the first half. Really enjoying it so far. I'm excited to read the rest and share my thoughts once I finish it, but I am going to do a very short spoiler update for this first half. Spoilers incoming. Use the chapters to skip if you want, or mute me and wait till the frame around me disappears, either or. But let's talk about spoilers for the first half of The Angel's Game. I have so many theories surrounding Corelli. I think he's such a fascinating character, and I really want to know why he wants Martine to invent a religion for him. It feels like it's being set up, or he's trying to come across that his purpose is just to make money. He's going to create a new religion. He's going to publish this religious text, and so it's going to sell like hotcakes. He'll make a bunch of money. But I don't think that's his real motive. It feels too simple, especially considering all the weird circumstances surrounding him, all of the coincidences, his ability to track down Martine multiple times in different ways and places, and of course, this fire that killed Martine's previous publishers, feels like there might be something to that. And he definitely has a bit of an otherworldly, supernatural quality, especially when Martine first met him in person and noticed that he didn't blink for their entire interaction. He just has something weird about him, and whether he is a man who's been cursed to immortality or something along those lines, or whether he's a demon or an angel. He does wear a lot of angel paraphernalia, so there could be something to that, maybe a fallen angel. But my theory is that he wants Martine to create a religion where he can have a place of power, whether he is the god of the religion or just a prominent prophet or angel or whatever. I think he wants the power that comes with essentially leading a religion of his own, and he doesn't feel able, or for some reason is prevented by some higher power maybe from creating it himself. So he's enlisting Martine to sort of do all of the groundwork to create this religion. I'm curious to know sort of what the end goal is, why he wants this power, unless it's just this like megalomaniac, drive for power without any specific end point or goal. But I feel like there has to be some sort of more specific reason why he wants the power that comes along with that, religious significance. So that's kind of my theory right now. We'll see if I got it right. But I'm very intrigued by him. I find him very menacing, and I don't think his intentions are good. It feels like he's tempting Martine, and what he's offering is too good to be true. So we'll see how that turns out. In terms of the other characters, I'm curious about some of them, like Vidal, if he was actually a good friend to Martine originally, and he just became so jealous of Martine's talent and also wanted Christina and knew that Martine was in love with her, and that caused the deterioration of their relationship. Or if he never liked him from the start and was always just assuaging his own guilt over Martine's father's death, and also, just using him for what he felt he needed or could get from him. Or a third option, that he never changed his opinion of Martine. He always cared for him the way he seemed to near the beginning of the novel, but that somehow Corelli was able to taint his love for him, or twist that love for him, or somehow manipulate him or influence him into shifting the nature of their relationship. I don't know yet, because I was so impressed at the start. I actually made a couple notes in the margins about how lucky Martine was to have such amazing coworkers or mentors or bosses, specifically Vidal and his original boss at the newspaper. And I really enjoyed his dynamic with Vidal at the beginning. It really felt like they had such a genuine, loving, reciprocal friendship. And to watch that fall apart was really sad. I felt so bad for Martine. And I'm curious, I just want to know, I feel like there has to be some deeper reason that sort of ties in with the larger plot for that switch. Or at least I hope there is, because I think there's some interesting potential there. So I also have a theory that Corelli was the one who originally caused Martine's sickness, so he could turn around and cure it to convince Martine to create a religion for him. So we'll see if I'm right about that, because the way his illness started was very suspect. And then, of course, we come around as well to the original mysteries that happened very early on, where Corelli invited him to spend a night with the femme fatale character from his first story, who doesn't exist in reality. And the location where he met her was destroyed in a fire many years previously and didn't look anything like it looked the night that he went and met this fictional woman who was very real. How did Corelli set this up? Was it all an illusion? Was it drugs and hallucination? Was it something supernatural? I'm very curious about that as well. Or was it a dream? I don't know. But there's so many mysteries to figure out. I'm really intrigued. And right now I'm just kind of full of theories. I'm trying to tie things together. I'm trying to make connections. Who knows if I have anything figured out? Maybe I'm completely on the wrong path. This might be entertaining to watch for someone who's read this and already knows what's going to happen, especially if I'm very wrong. But I'm excited. I'm having fun with coming up with a bunch of theories, even if they are all wrong. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. So that's it for my spoiler thoughts on the Angels game. And I think that's going to be it for my first update in general. I am probably sitting around 4 stars right now. I think a lot is going to depend on how a lot of these different threads are tied together, how these mysteries are revealed and resolved. So we'll see what happens, but I'm really, really enjoying the reading process. I love Carlos Ruiz Zafón's writing style. I love how atmospheric it is. It's very dark and moody and sexy and witty and sarcastic, and it's great. All books should be like that. Well, not really, because variety is the spice of life, but more books should be like this, okay? So that's it from me for my first update. I'm going to go off and finish this, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on the Angels game and move on to another sequel. Okay, bye! Okay, so I just finished The Angel's Game, and I have thoughts, which I'm very excited to share. Of course, I will do non-spoiler, and then I will let you know when I'm getting into spoilers, so you can avoid those if you haven't read it yet. But let's talk. So when I finished this book, out of curiosity, I looked up what other people were saying on the internet about it. I was curious because to me, while it does share a lot of similarities to The Shadow of the Wind in terms of the atmosphere, the tone, that 1930s noir and dreary vibe in the Barcelona setting with the mystery and the darkness as the undertone, definitely in common with the two. And of course, there are some overlapping characters and overlapping settings between the two because The Angel's Game is a prequel to The Shadow of the Wind. I found that the story itself was quite different. That's not a bad thing. I don't think anyone wants to read a series where each book is just rehashing the same thing over and over again. I mean, maybe somebody does. For a book like this, I wouldn't have wanted them to be the same. And it's hard to talk about how exactly they are very different without getting into spoilers. So I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But I really liked this. And it was interesting because looking at what people were saying online, it seems like a lot of people who loved The Shadow of the Wind really did not like The Angel's Game, which is interesting that it seems to be such a common view, but I can't say that I agree. It is a very different book. It's doing a very different thing than The Shadow of the Wind, but I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I only finished it maybe half an hour ago, so of course my thoughts might change over time as I let things absorb and think about it more, analyze it more. But right now, I think I'm sitting at 5 stars again, which honestly is fantastic. I love that I'm starting this video with a success. And it's great because, like I said, I already bought the other books in the series. So 2 5 stars is a good sign that I'll enjoy the rest of the series. I'm trying to think of things I can say to make up a review that is non-spoilery. I guess I'll just say that a lot of the things that this shares in common with The Shadow of the Wind are things that I really loved about it. So that is that setting of 1930s Barcelona. It is that noir vibe. It has that mystery element. It's a little unsettling and eerie, but you also have these characters that are very vibrant, very complex, and very funny. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor in these books that I really enjoyed. And honestly, it has been a long time since I read The Shadow of the Wind at this point, so I can't remember how much I was laughing while I was reading it, but this book made me giggle and guffaw a lot. I found a lot of the humor really entertaining. Several times as I was reading this, made my husband listen as I read him a joke, which he laughed at to indulge me. But this was very up my alley in terms of humor. I had a whole tab color just to track things that I found funny. So if that tells you anything, I love that this manages to find a middle ground between the comedy and the really serious, dark, mysterious, eerie quality. I really enjoyed, as I did with The Shadow of the Wind, the descriptive language. I really enjoy Zaffon's writing style. This was just really, really fun. And the characters are fantastic. I loved David Martin as a protagonist. He's a very interesting protagonist, very layered, and he's older than the protagonist in The Shadow of the Wind, which I personally enjoyed. And he had some really great relationships. His relationship with Sempere Sr., his relationship with Isabella was probably my favorite in the whole book. His relationships with Vidal and Christina were very interesting. And of course, his relationship with Andreas Corelli, which is sort of the central conflict of the book and definitely a very interesting dynamic between the two of them. Even his relationships with some of the characters that are a little more minor, even though they are recurring throughout the book, like Don Basilio and Detective Grande, I really liked their dynamics. I really liked seeing his interactions with them. He had very distinct relationships with everyone, and each relationship had a different flavor, and the self that he was with each of these people was different, which feels realistic because we show different sides of ourselves to everyone in our lives. So I really liked that Zaffon dove into that and really gave us all these different aspects of Martine, which also ties into sort of the larger mystery and narrative in a way that I found quite pleasing, but I won't talk about that until I get into the spoiler section because it is a bit of a spoiler. The atmosphere, the writing style, the characters and relationships, and that central mystery really kept me hooked. I wanted to know who Andreas Corelli was. I wanted to know why he had commissioned this particular book. I wanted to know what was happening to characters that were passing or disappearing. It was all very intriguing, and it kept me intrigued until the very end, and I found the reveal baffling at first, But then as I thought about it more, I really liked it. I found it very satisfying and interesting. So I really loved this. 5 stars for The Angel's Game, just like The Shadow of the Wind. 5 stars across the board. I'm so happy about this. And now I am extra excited to keep reading in the series. Of course, now I have to wait till I finish this video because I have 3 more sequels to read. But after that, although technically this is a prequel, but you get it. After that, though, I think I'm going to have to finish this series because I don't know if I can wait 2 years or whatever it is in between every single installment. I feel like that is slow torture. So those are my non-spoilery thoughts about The Angel's Game. I'm going to get into spoilers now. So watch the frame around me or use the timestamps, the chapters down below in the description box to skip ahead if you haven't read this yet and you would like to, so you don't get spoiled. Let's talk about the ending. I gave my predictions in the last part, and I believe my prediction was that Andreas Corelli was a fallen angel. And the ending was not spelled out for the reader. It's definitely open to interpretation. So there certainly is, a world where the ending was exactly what I predicted, and Andreas Corelli was some sort of fallen angel continuing to try to find the proper human to create this religion for his own power, for his own ends, and that some combination of his influence, his presence in a human's life, and the work he was commissioning them to do kept driving these people mad time and time again. So that is one interpretation, and I have seen from the little bit of research I've done since I finished this about half an hour ago that there are people who abide by that theory, who believe that theory to be true. But then there's this other theory which starts to come together in the last couple chapters, which is the theory I'm leaning towards more now that I finished it, which is that Andreas Corelli never existed, and he was entirely in Martine's mind, that Martine was slowly going insane, and he was Andreas Corelli all along, whether it was an instance of sort of a multiple personality situation or just a series of delusions, of rewritten memories. And I think that's the more interesting theory, less so this supernatural element of, a fallen angel, and more so a man who is troubled and gone through a lot in his life and potentially has some sort of brain tumor that is impacting the functioning of his brain, and his grasp on reality is slipping, and he is interpreting and encoding the memories of things that happened to him in a very different way than reality. And I think that is a really interesting way to look at this book. And that's, I think, where my headcanon is going and how I would interpret the ending, which I think is very interesting. Even though it doesn't align with my original theory, I like it. I think it's a fascinating direction to go. And I really liked how the character of David Martine remained sympathetic, remained three-dimensional, remained likable and interesting and complex, even as it's revealed to us that it's likely that he not only has lost his mind, but also has been going on a murdering rampage and killing a bunch of people in his life, including people he loved and was close to. Of course, that is awful. And, we don't condone murder in this house, but he's still an interesting and sympathetic character, and he's still someone that I would continue to read books about, and still a character that I like somehow, which is, I think, a really difficult balance to find, just like Zafon was able to find that perfect balance between the dark, mysterious, noir quality and the light, comedic, tongue-in-cheek, almost slapstick quality at times, and I really loved the marrying of those two things. So, The Angel's Game, fantastic. I don't know if I have any other spoilers to share. I love Isabella. She's great. That's not a spoiler. I just really like her and wanted to mention her again. I think she's fantastic. One final thing is that I don't love how women are talked about all the time in this book, but I will say it was an improvement over The Shadow of the Wind. I think it is more so meant to be a reflection of society in the time period in the 1930s and the attitudes of the main characters, or the characters who are speaking about women, than it is about the author's views himself. Because it is worse in The Shadow of the Wind, where our protagonist is much younger, inexperienced with women, and it shows in the ways that he conceptualizes women. Whereas David Martine, who still is not super experienced with women, but is a little older and has known more women throughout his life, occasionally feels like he's objectifying women in a way that I don't love, but it feels much more subtle. And we also get to see a couple different women who are very three-dimensional, very strong and intelligent and interesting and complex in their own right. So yeah, just a note on that. I don't know if I have anything else to share about this. I really, really liked it. I'm so glad I could give it 5 stars, and yeah, what a great way to start this video. I'm so happy. So looking through the options, I think what I'm most in the mood for right this very instant is a little sci-fi. So I'm going to pick up Ocean's Echo, the sequel to Winter's Orbit. Sci-fi with a gay romance at the center that just melted my soul in the first book. I loved this romance so much. I loved the 2 characters. I really liked the political intrigue and the world building in the first book. So I'm very excited to read on. Similarly to The Shadow of the Wind, it's been a minute since I read it. So do I remember the different political factions and the tensions and what was going on in that dynamic? Not super clearly, no. But my hope is that this book will kind of ease us back into it and I'll be able to remember exactly what was going on. But I am very excited. After one 5-star read for this video, I'm feeling super pumped to read the rest of these. I'm really hoping the rest of these will be 5 stars as well. And I'm so excited to read this because I miss these characters so much. Although now I'm a bit worried because I just read the description on the inside of the dust jacket and it seems like the characters are not the same characters from the first one. I was really looking forward to seeing Kiem and Janen again, and if they're not in this book, I'm going to be really sad. Not to say that the characters in this book won't also be great. I'm sure that Everina Maxwell will do a fantastic job building new characters, but I am really invested in these 2. So I really hope they're still around. Otherwise, I'm going to be sad. No point worrying about it. I'm just going to read the book and then I will know for sure and I can tell you. So I'm going to read approximately half the book and then I'll come and give you a little update and we'll see what's going on. It is pretty late at night, but I just got to the 50% mark of Ocean's Echo, so I thought I would hop in front of the camera and give you a little mid-book update, because I have a feeling I might finish the rest of this tonight and or early in the morning. So if I don't give you a mid-update now, we might not get one at all. So Ocean's Echo, so far, I'm really enjoying it. It's great so far, has a lot of the same vibes as the first one, which obviously we would hope for. And at first I was really sad, I must say, because the main characters, the 2 protagonists in this book, are not the same as in the first book. And I got really attached to the main characters in Winter's Orbit. Janen and Kiem, I loved them so much as individual characters and together as a couple. Very sweet. And I must admit that I was disappointed to realize that, at least in the first 50% of this book, they're not around. I kind of hope we get a little cameo, because I would love to see them and what they're up to. Maybe if there's a 3rd book, we can see all 4 of our protagonists together. That would actually be awesome. I did start off on a little bit of a sour note, not a huge sour note, just a little sour note, because I was sad that Kiem and Janen weren't around. But I shouldn't have been worried, because Everina Maxwell is very good at writing characters that very quickly grow on you and get you invested in their story and rooting for them. The way she writes characters is like that one person that you meet at work or at school who just attaches themselves to you and in the best way possible forces you to be their friend. And as someone who is more on the introvert side of things in real life, I have always deeply appreciated those people, because many of my friends throughout my life have only been my friends because they were the kind of person who was like, hey, you're my friend now. nothing you can do about it. Sorry. And I've been like, okay, great, cool. I'm along for the ride. So I love those kinds of people. And I feel like Everina Maxwell writes characters like that are just like, hey, you, reader, who's reading this book? Yeah, you're going to love me now and care about me. Too bad. You have no choice. Off we go. And again, I feel great about that. I'm totally on board. So I'm having a lot of fun. I really like Tenelheim and Surit, our protagonists in this book so far. We have a little bit of a chaotic extroverted mess of a human in the best possible way, and a very buttoned up, serious rule follower, list maker, and their dynamic together is quite entertaining. Each character is interesting on their own, but then together they have a really fun push and pull, sort of opposites attract kind of friendship so far. And so far, it really is just friendship. Obviously, there are little hints that something romantic could develop between the two of them, but it's definitely a very slow burn so far. And I like that. I'm enjoying the other characters as well. For example, Istara is a non-binary character who is really funny. They're very rough around the edges, but again, super lovable. And they have a really fun dynamic with Tenelheim specifically because they just think he is so incompetent and such an idiot. And I feel like Tenelheim would agree with that assessment, but you can tell that they like him still on some level. So I'm really enjoying the characters. I still find the world building and the political machinations of all these different worlds. In this book, it's sort of machinations between different areas within the military and civilian organizations. And it's all really interesting. I really like science fiction and fantasy, speculative fiction in general, that really gets into the political climate of whatever world is being built. It's one of those things that I just find endlessly fascinating. And I feel like there's so many opportunities to do something really interesting with the political structure and societal structure of a world that you can just make up out of thin air. And it always makes me sad when authors don't do a lot with it. But I feel like in this world that Everina Maxwell has built, there is a huge amount of world building, and I love it. Kind of similarly to the first book, the writing style is not really anything to write home about. It's not terrible by any means. It's well written. It's very easy to read, easy to follow, but it doesn't have exceedingly beautiful prose, which not every book has to have, but I am a sucker for beautiful prose. And there are quotes here and there or descriptions here and there that I find quite beautiful in the way they're written. So it's not like everything is just completely matter of fact or whatever. There are still passages that are a little more, descriptive and some really beautiful turns of phrase, but it's definitely not as frequent an occurrence in this book as in some other books that I have read and loved. It's fine. Not all books have to do that. It's just something to note. And yeah, I don't think I really have anything else to say that is non-spoilery. I'm not sure I really have spoilery thoughts either at this point. I'm interested in, where the plot is going, and I am curious about how we're going to solve some of the things that are mysterious and unknown to us at this point, but I'm not sure that I really have any clear theories about what's happening. I am intrigued and along for the ride, but so far, I'm not sure I have enough data to guess at where we're going necessarily. And sometimes that would be a drawback for me, where I would feel like, we're not getting enough breadcrumbs that we can kind of follow along and theorize as we go and kind of try to figure things out by the time the book reveals something to us. But the way this book is paced, it is quite slow, and it has been focusing very heavily on the character development. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the second half of the book we get a lot more of those little hints and details that would allow me to come up with a theory before the reveals land. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way this book has been planned and structured, and I'm fine with that. So I don't think I'm going to share spoiler thoughts on this right now either, because I feel like everything I have to say I have said, and none of it has to be spoilery for any particular reason. So yeah, those are my thoughts for the first half of Ocean's Echo. I'm having a great time. I really like it, and I'm very excited for the moment when Tenelheim and Surit finally cross the line from friendship into romance. If that is going to happen, it does feel like there's a lot of tension. So maybe, hopefully it'll happen, because I feel like it's going to be really sweet. for them to finally let each other in that way and be vulnerable even more so with each other. And I am a romantic at heart, even though I don't read a lot of romance in general. And sometimes I complain about the way romance is included in the genre fiction I read. But I don't know, something about the way Everina Maxwell writes characters and writes relationships just makes me so giddy. Like, you know, I'm a little kid kicking my feet in excitement for them to finally kiss, you know? I'm having fun, clearly. So that's it for my little update, 50% of the way through. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back here tomorrow morning having finished it, because even though it's not the most adult, responsible decision in the world for me to stay up until I finish the book tonight, because, you know, I need sleep to function and I have work to do tomorrow, so I should probably actually sleep. I might just stay up all night reading it. The bookworm's dilemma. You all have been there. Don't lie to me. I know you have. So that's it. I'm gonna go, and I'll see you when I finish Ocean's Echo. Okay, so I just finished Ocean's Echo about 5 minutes ago, and I'm here to give the final wrap up. And you can probably tell by the expression on my face, I'm feeling pretty happy. This is another 5-star read for me. This was fantastic. I loved it so much. I shouldn't have doubted Everina Maxwell's ability to write characters that I would love, and a romance that I would fall for, and a world that is fun and intriguing and unique and interesting and compelling, because they've done it yet again. I'm still a little sad that we didn't get the characters from the first book in this one at all, but I'm really hoping in book 3 they come together somehow. That would be really great for my little sentimental heart. But I loved Tennille and Surratt so much. They're incredible. They finally kissed on page 258, so a little bit past halfway, and it was very satisfying. And then it still went on to be even more of a slow burn after that, in a way that I feel like normally would have frustrated me, but I felt like it made sense for these characters and this world and the situation they were in. I've read so many stories where it's basically the end of the world. They're in the midst of some great battle, but they still find time to stop and have sex. I appreciated that that was not how this was structured. It was much more realistic, and their relationship felt very genuine, very built on a strong foundation of trust and intimacy and friendship and respect, and I love that stuff. It's great. So yes, very satisfied. This was very fun. I feel like this is one of those cases where I give a book 5 stars and I really liked it, had a lot of fun with it, but I don't really have a huge amount to say other than everything was great. I feel like this series is a little lighter. It does have some political intrigue. It does have some themes to do with mental health and self-acceptance and grief, misuse of political and military-based power. There's more going on in these books than just the relationships and the characters, but it really does feel like the core of these stories are the characters and their relationships, and I just love them so much that I feel like I'm less focused on everything else. I'm taking it in and enjoying it and finding it interesting, but I'm really so much more focused on these characters kind of finding finding themselves, finding this sense of ease in their own skin, and finding a sense of ease with another person, you know, finding that person that makes you feel more yourself than you've ever been and more comfortable with that than you've ever been. And, you know, as a romantic, I have felt that way about my own partner. I feel like I am more myself than I ever was before I met my partner. He allows me to be me on a different level, and he loves and accepts every facet of me, even the facets that are annoying or silly or strange. And I like to think that I'm able to provide that for him as well, this sort of radical acceptance and love. And I feel like that's what these characters have, and it's just so wholesome and lovely to read about. It really makes me happy. If Maxwell can keep pumping out characters like this and relationships like this, I will keep eating them up happily. So the themes that it's talking about, I think, are interesting and worth exploring. But again, I feel like these books, as much as they do touch on some of those themes, it's not really the main focus of the story. It's just sort of a side plot, you know, things like looking at how the military treats individual soldiers as expendable, more so like machines than human beings. And I appreciate that because most of the characters in this book are in the army or army adjacent. And so I think a story that takes place almost entirely within a military structure should hopefully be able to critique the structure that it's a part of and kind of make some sort of a statement about the status quo. And yes, there are, you know, military coups and wars and battles and corrupt politicians and experimentation and all kinds of things going on that sort of fit into the sci-fi framework. But at its heart, this is a story about two adorable dudes finding themselves and finding each other, and that's what I love about it. So I don't even think I'm going to share spoilers, to be honest, because I'm not sure what I would even spoil for you. You know, I was happy with how it ended. I was satisfied by the few little twists that were in there and how things developed. I found the expansion upon the concepts of architects and readers and how those mind powers worked and the source of the artifacts very interesting. But again, I don't really have anything to say other than I found it interesting. I liked it. It was good. So those are my thoughts on Ocean's Echo. Reading this book was a very lovely experience, and I would highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for a speculative fiction that has a LGBTQA plus normalized world. We have a societal standard of all people or most people wearing some sort of a gender marker of, you know, jewelry and accessories of particular materials. So flint, for example, indicates that they identify as female, whereas wood represents male. And I can't remember right now what the non-binary material was, but sometimes non-binary or gender fluid characters wear combinations of both. Our protagonists both identify as male and are in a romantic relationship or very slowly develop a romantic relationship, but we also have a non-binary side character, and there's many other characters in the story that have a variety of gender identities, and I really like that aspect of this world because it definitely feels a bit reductive to envision, you know, a whole other set of planets, whole new societies, but they still seem to have no queer people. Like, that is so strange to me. So I really like that this world normalizes it to such a degree. It's really just absolutely lovely to read, and I wish our world was more like this one in that way. There's many ways in which I'm glad our world is not like this one, but the way that they handle gender and sexuality and freedom of expression for everyone and acceptance of everyone, at least in terms of their gender and sexual identity, is something that I really wish we had in the real world. So those are all my thoughts on this. I don't have anything else to say. I'll probably just keep going on and on about how much I like it if I keep talking. So I'm going to wrap this up. 2 5-star reads for this video so far. That means I love 50% of the books for this video, no matter what happens next. And that makes me very happy. I feel like I'm going to have to cite this video every time someone tells me that I read books just to hate them and that I never give out 5 stars and I'm too harsh of a critic. Clearly that is not the case. I very happily give away 5 stars when I really enjoy a book, and I've been having a great time this video so far. Hopefully you're having a good time too. So now that I've finished The Angel's Game and Ocean's Echo, it's time to move on to book 3 out of 4. So I have 2 options for my next pick. I could either go Parable of the Talents or A Day of Fallen Night. And in my current mood right this millisecond, I feel like I'm leaning towards A Day of Fallen Night. I am still mildly, and by mildly I mean very significantly intimidated by how big this book is and how heavy it is, but I have a feeling that Parable of the Talents might leave me feeling similarly to how I felt upon finishing Parable of the Sower, which was very drained in a good way, but, you know, emotionally wringed out. And I feel like if I read this first, and I do feel that way, I'm going to really struggle to get through a book that is this gigantic. So I think I'm going to read this one first, and then hopefully, even if this one leaves me a little drained and needing to take just a reading break for a couple days to recover, at least I'll be done this video. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save Parable of the Talents for last, and I'm going to go off and tackle this monster, A Day of Fallen Night, which is, how many pages are you again? I can't even hold it in one hand. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait. About 850 pages. So I'm going to go off and read approximately 425 pages of this, and then I will come back and give you my thoughts on the first half of A Day of Fallen Night. I'm really excited for this. I'm hoping I love it as much as I did Priory of the Orange Tree. So far, my track record in this video is amazing. We can only hope that that continues with A Day of Fallen Night. So I might be wearing wrist braces when I come back because I feel like holding that book for any length of time is going to be carpal tunnel inducing, but it's all going to be worth it, hopefully, because it's going to be another 5-star read. I'm putting it out into the universe. Okay, so I have now finished 50% of A Day of Fallen Night, which means I've read the equivalent of a whole other book because I'm now on page 420 something. Again, only 50% of the way through. This book is a monster, but luckily it's a very pleasant monster. I'm having a really good time reading this. I'm really enjoying Samantha Shannon's writing style yet again. Her writing is just so beautifully lyrical. I actually read a couple of my favorite quotes so far to my husband, and his first reaction, the first words out of his mouth were, "Wow, that is so musical." And he's a musician, so he would know. And I totally agree. I love how rhythmic the writing is. It really does have a sort of musical, lyrical flow to it, which is just beautiful, wonderful, enjoyable to read. And on top of the writing just being really beautiful, of course, this world is so well built. It's the same world as the Priory of the Orange Tree, but this is a prequel, so we're, I believe, a couple centuries ahead, and it's so richly developed. There are so many different countries and political systems and societal norms and religions and folk tales and fairy tales and superstitions and on and on and on and on. I really love how rich this world is and that we really get to dive into it and explore it deeply, both in the first book but also in this one as well. And I like the structure of this, that we're going between the north, the south, East and the West, and having multiple point of view characters, seeing this big development in the world from multiple points of view, and getting to meet lots of new characters along the way, most of which, if not all of them, I'm really enjoying. If I had to pick a favorite character, I probably wouldn't be able to pick just one, but I would say Tunava and Wolf are probably tied for most intriguing to me at this moment. But I really like all of them. Glorian and Dumai are also very interesting characters. I think Glorian, for me, is currently still, she's 16, and she definitely feels younger than the other characters, although I think Wolf is around the same age. Maybe he's 18, I can't remember. But I do feel like I'm sort of waiting for Glorian to step into her own, and I think maybe that's something that's about to happen, considering some events that took place around the time that I stopped reading. I think that Glorian might be on the cusp of coming of age into her adult self, and I'm looking forward to that transformation. Dumai, for me so far, feels the least developed in terms of knowing her as a character and knowing her personality. I feel like most of what we know about her, we know because of her relationships to other characters, which isn't a bad thing. I do find her relationships interesting, but I would love to know more about her internal life, you know? And so far, the storyline in the East has a lot going on plot-wise and sort of had more happening that was external to the main character, to the point of view character from earlier on than the other areas, whereas the other areas we kind of had more time to really get in tune with the characters before sort of external big plot points started dropping on their heads like bombs. So anyways, though, I really like the characters. I also love, again, how diverse these characters are. We have gay representation, lesbian representation, bisexual representation. We have a trans character already. It's a fantasy world, so race is not necessarily a one-to-one, but it does feel like we have a variety of characters with different skin tones and, you know, from countries that are inspired by different cultures on Earth instead of all being from one homogeneous culture. I also really love that we get variety in the political systems. Again, this is all stuff that also exists in the Priory of the Orange Tree, but having matriarchal systems, having queendoms, very fun, and also getting to see differences between a matriarchal system that is very woman dominant, where women are the warriors, they are the muscle in the community, they are the leaders, and then the men take on more of a housekeeping role. They are cooking, they are rearing the children, they are growing the food, they are making clothes, and, you know, sort of having that version of matriarchy, which really just feels closer to, you know, a direct swap from many societies we've had on Earth and continue to have on Earth. But then we also have another matriarchal culture where the country has always been led by a series of queens, and it's called a queendom, and presumably the queen is revered and, you know, treated with immense respect, but it's not as much of a total flip of a patriarchal system. We still have some misogynistic tendencies. We have a bit of a treatment of even the highest ruler in the land, these queens, as being a means to an end, to produce an heir, that the most important thing they can do is reproduce, to give birth to a daughter, to become the next queen. And a lot of men who have a lot of political power within the society and just more traditional gender roles there. So it's interesting to kind of compare and contrast these two very different versions of a matriarchy, and I enjoy that. I find it interesting to see different ways that, you know, groups of people living together can structure themselves, you know, and in the other matriarchal culture, which is the Priory, the women are having children, but it is much more so seen as, you know, something that they can sort of choose to put themselves forward for, to continue to create members of their community, ideally to create more women to be warriors, and that after they give birth, the rearing of the children is no longer on the mother's shoulders. They don't have traditional mother-child relationships within the Priory, and that relationship is discouraged. It's more so that they're all sisters and brothers, they're all a community together, and it is typically the group of men, not even just the biological father, although it seems that the biological father sort of takes precedence as the primary parent for the child, but that the men as a whole are raising the children. And on top of that, in the queendom, they revere a man. Their saint, the founder of their religion, essentially is a man, and they live by his word. Whereas in the priory, their religion is based on a female historical figure who they call the mother. So just fundamentally a different look at what a matriarchy or a society led by women could look like. And I'm really enjoying the plot as well. I'm loving watching everything unfold, and I'm really loving that I had a theory early on, which I'm sure once I reveal it in the spoiler section, y'all will tell me in the comments if you read this that you knew as well from early on. I'm sure it was very obvious, but I still felt proud of myself for guessing from very early on a connection between two of the characters, and while it hasn't been 100% confirmed, they've basically confirmed it at this point, and I felt very proud of myself. So anyways, I'm having a lot of fun with this. I'm really, really enjoying it. Such gorgeous writing, which really is making it just an absolute pleasure to read, and making it so that I'm reading it much faster than I think I would have otherwise, because it is very dense. There's a lot of world building, there's a lot of characters to stay on top of, and, you know, political connections between different countries, history, you know, historical figures to remember. So much is going on, but the beautiful writing just really carries you through, in my experience. So I think that's about all I can share without getting into spoiler territory. So let's get into the spoilers. Jump ahead using the chapters down below. If you don't want any spoilers for this book, you can go right to the end of the spoilers and just get the wrap up of this section of the video. So the theory I had from very early on, I would say after we'd met Wolf a couple times, a handful of times, and we learned about Tunava having lost an infant, we didn't even know at that point that her infant was a boy, but I immediately guessed that Wolf was going to be her lost infant. Not only did we not know that Tunava's infant was a son, but we also didn't know that it wasn't confirmed that the infant had died. The way she was talking about it seemed like she'd lost her infant, either had a stillbirth or lost her child very early on in life, and sort of was able to confirm that the infant had died. But even at that point, I was theorizing that somehow it was going to work out that Wolf was her lost child. But then we got the story of what happened, and we find out that the infant's body was never found. Just the infant's biological father's body was found, and they knew that the baby was with him, and the baby went missing, but they never found the baby. All this talking about a baby going missing is making me think of The Importance of Being Earnest and the baby in the carpet bag left at a train station. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So even from before we got all that information, I was like, there is no way that Wolf is not this child. And then once we got that information, I was like, okay, 100%. Wolf is going to be Tunava's lost son, and they're going to be reunited somehow and discover their connection, and it's going to be great. And then, not in the last chapter, but one of the last couple chapters, we got confirmation. Oh yeah, it's right here. Wolf had nothing. No legend, no past, no explanations. Only a vague dream of bees. And we learn that the child's biological father was one of the people in the priory who had sort of this connection to the bees where they could essentially communicate and work together to get honey. And he'd gone out to get honey, taken their infant son with him, and something had happened and he had died and the baby was gone. And Wolf remembers something to do with bees in the forest. I knew it. And I even wrote in my book, I knew it, with many exclamation points, because I was so proud of myself. But again, I'm sure those of you who have read this are going to be like, yeah, Elizabeth, that was so obvious. Why are you getting so excited? Small things make me happy, and I think it's good to celebrate the small things, okay? If I've learned anything in my almost 2 years of life, it's that you have to celebrate things that make you happy, even if they're small things, okay? No shame. So I'm very happy about that. I'm really excited. I really, really hope that we get a reunion between Tunava and Wolf, because Tunava is so overcome by grief from losing her infant, which, I mean, makes total sense. I think anyone would be. And learning that he's alive and then meeting him, and Wolf is such a sweet, genuine, kind person. I just can't wait for that. And for Wolf as well, of course, to finally learn where he came from and to figure out why he has all this weird stuff going on, where he seems resistant to this disease, which seems connected to source of power that also feeds the priory, although we don't really know that yet, and that he seems to have some sort of level of magical power potentially. And it'll be interesting to see sort of how he fits into the dynamic of the priory, because he has been raised in a more patriarchal society, or at least more of a society that follows what we would consider sort of traditional gender roles of men being the warriors and the protectors, although there were also female warriors even within the same sort of division as Wolf. He he has been raised to be a warrior, sort of on the path to be a knight, and in the Priory, men are not the warriors. So it'll be interesting to see if that's addressed. I'm not sure if we'll get around to that or not, but all I really want is the reunion. I think that's going to be amazing. I'm really excited for it. So my other theory that has not been proven yet, but I'm just getting a vibe, is that Canthi is not telling the whole truth. There's something suspicious about her. I don't know if I would go so far as to say she's evil, but I'm getting possible evil vibes. Some weird stuff started happening at the Priory after she arrived, and I'm wondering if there's more to her than meets the eye. There's something just sort of not quite right about her, and her magic is so fundamentally different, or seems to be so fundamentally different from the sit-in that the Sisters of the Priory use and have access to, that it makes her even more suspicious to me. So we'll see what happens. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if she somehow was able to sort of impersonate the old prioress to convince one of the sisters to kill the father of Siyu's child. It seemed like maybe, and it seems like maybe she set something up or created an illusion to trick Siyu, or to show Siyu he was dead for her to run away. It just, so many weird things and unexplained things were happening after she arrived. It also seems like she is trying to manipulate and or seduce Tunava, which she should back off, because Tunava and Esbar are an adorable couple and don't need any of these shenanigans. Some of the other things I'm thinking might happen, I feel like, are pretty obvious. You know, there are a couple characters in a couple of the different areas, countries, that are clearly sort of going to try to either forcefully take the throne, or at the very least try to heavily manipulate the young women who are soon to become the rulers of their respective countries. That's being telegraphed pretty clearly, but, you know, see it coming. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and how directly they choose to grasp at that power, or if it is going to be more of a behind the scenes manipulation sort of deal. And I'm just really enjoying the ride. I'm interested to see what the origin of these hybrid animals is, and if any of the dragons that have been released are in fact the Nameless One, or if they are spawn of the Nameless One. I have to admit that I don't remember in great detail if we learned anything about the past in terms of the dragons and the Nameless One in the Priory. I remember the Nameless One being there, but I don't specifically remember if we learned anything that would be kind of a spoiler for that, or just give us more information about the situation there. But I'm just enjoying the ride. I'm finding it really interesting to see how things are playing out. And I found the scene of the ship being destroyed with Glorian's parents on it so heartbreaking. The final moments with her parents together were heartbreaking, and then Wolf trying to protect the woman in his squad who he had sort of a semi-romantic relationship with. They at least had a sexual relationship, and, you know, not being able to save her from burning alive, and then just being so attached to staying by her side and dragging her to shore and not wanting to leave her body behind. It was just so heartbreaking, and just all of the little passages around that time around grief were really moving to me, especially because I right now am grieving. I lost a family member this weekend, a couple days ago, and I'm sort of fluctuating between being really not okay and being, you know, pretty numb and trying to push through. And a lot of these passages that are to do with grief are really relevant to me right now and very beautifully written. So yeah, I'm feeling a lot of feelings. I'm really enjoying this. It's actually been helping me a lot in the last couple days, you know, needing a distraction, sinking into this world and into the beautiful lyrical writing and all of the really evocative descriptions of these varied landscapes and these creatures, and the connection between the characters and, you know, people and their animals, the Gnumons and their sort of bonded humans. Just such a sweet relationship and bond. All of that has been helping me a lot over the last couple days. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say spoiler wise. So yeah, that's A Day of Fallen Night so far. Like I said, really enjoying it, really delivering on the gorgeous writing and the world building and the political intrigue and the characters and the relationships and the suspense and the awesome, terrifying, cool creatures. It's just kind of doing it all for me right now. I'm gonna go finish this. I need to put it down. It is so heavy. Wow, my hands. I feel like my fingers keep cramping from holding it up. But anyways, those are my thoughts, and I'll be back soon for more. I finished A Day of Fallen Night and I feel so satisfied. There is nothing quite like finishing a doorstopper, especially when you've been annotating. I mean, look at this. It is a thing of beauty. Anyway, I loved this. I feel like I can't hide that from the smile on my face. 3 out of 3. This is yet another 5-star read, and I can't believe I waited so long to read this. What is wrong with me? This was fantastic. I loved it. It's a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree and takes place approximately 500 years before the events of The Priory of the Orange Tree. And it's so fascinating. Like I said in the halfway update, I still love the beautiful, gorgeous lyrical writing style. I love the world building and the political intrigue and the mystical creatures, the dragons and the wyverns and some other weird creatures, and the relationships and the characters really are the best part of these books for me, and that continued all the way to the end. There were some really amazing, touching moments. Some things that I guessed would happen happened, and they were so satisfying. And yeah, I'm just really happy. I really, really loved this. Gorgeous, amazing, wonderful. So much diverse rep as well. We have 2 point of view characters who are lesbians. We have a bisexual point of view character. We have an asexual point of view character. We get to see relationships between 2 men, relationships between 2 women. We have side characters who have quite a few lines. They're definitely secondary characters, but they're not insignificant by any means. One is a trans man and the other is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. So we get a really wide array of queer representation, which I absolutely loved. And I loved that this is a non-homophobic world. There is definitely some, heteronormativity, especially with some of the hereditary monarchies that require female queens to give birth, which means they at least have to have heterosexual sex one time, but probably more than that. So there is a little bit of heteronormativity in that sense, but otherwise this feels like a very free, open, accepting world of people of all genders and sexual orientations. And I just love that in my fantasy. I'm really happy. I really liked this. I thought the plot was really fun and interesting. I'm not typically the most interested in long battles in the books I read. I don't mind, a short one as a climax, but if they get too long and detailed, I usually lose interest. This one had quite a few battles throughout and then had one more significant or longer battle scene or sort of series of battle scenes between different areas, and I didn't lose interest. I thought Samantha Shannon did a really good job of keeping it exciting, not getting too caught up in the weeds, but maybe giving a little bit more time to the battles than she did in the first book. So I thought it was a good balance. I also love that one of our point of view characters is a middle-aged woman. Tunava is one of my favorite characters in this book. I find her so interesting. I love that she is deeply kind and compassionate and has this really strong maternal instinct and sort of instinct to help and heal, even though her path in life is to be a warrior and to fight and to protect in a more traditionally male way. And I just love her. I find her fascinating. I love that we get to see a strong, powerful, complex, intelligent, powerful, middle-aged woman as a point of view character. And I find her relationship with Esbar, their dynamic, very compelling. I should also say, I feel like I mentioned in my halfway update that I wasn't quite clicking with Glorian yet. I do feel like Glorian grew a lot in the second half of the book. She definitely came into her own and found her voice and figured out sort of her path as a ruler, and I found that really fascinating. So while Glorian started off a little bit wishy-washy, felt a little like a spoiled princess, not really her own person, she grew so much over the course of the novel, and I really enjoyed watching that growth. I found the way that she ended the story really inspiring, and her story really is so much about finding that inner strength and also finding a sense of self that is detached from your ability to reproduce as a woman. While she is required to have a child to continue her royal line, she is able to realize that she does have value as a person outside of her womb. And I thought that was a really beautiful sort of arc for that character. I also didn't feel like I was fully connecting with Dumai in the first half. Again, I felt like Wolf and Tunava just grabbed me right away, and I was really invested in their stories and in them as characters. Whereas Dumai and Glorian, while their stories stories were fascinating and I was engaged reading their chapters, I wasn't as engaged with them as characters. I found them a little harder to relate to and connect to. We really don't get let into her inner world nearly as much as the other characters, and I think that continued to the end. She definitely remains, I think, the most mysterious and reserved of the four. But I will say that in her last couple chapters, she really grew on me. I feel like she started to shine. She opened up a little bit more. We got a little more of her internal life in a way that I found very satisfying. I just wish we got that a little earlier because it took so long to sort of get that window into her soul, you know? And one of the most exciting things to me, which I learned because I had the audiobook, I'd actually pre-ordered it at the same time that I pre-ordered the physical copy. And for the most part, I was reading the physical copy, but, you know, at nighttime when I wanted to go to bed and didn't want to keep a light on and keep my husband awake, I switched to the audiobook and I would listen to a couple chapters on a sleep timer. And then in the morning, I would just quickly skim through those chapters and add my annotations. And when I got to the end of the book, I realized there was still a little bit left at the end of the audiobook, and there was an interview, and Samantha Shannon, who previously said this would be the last book in this world and broke millions of hearts, apparently has sold another book in this world set after this one, so nestled in between the two existing books. And while it might take years for her to get around to writing it and for it to be published and for me to be able to inject it into my eyeballs, that was a really weird way to put that. I am so sorry. But anyways, even though it might take a while for me to get to read it, I am so excited that this world is not gone forever because I am mildly obsessed with it and I need more. So this was really fantastic. I'm really happy I read it, and I would highly recommend it. If you're a fan of epic fantasy, if you're a fan of wholesome romances that are definitely not taking over the book, this is not romantasy by any means, but characters that are really complex and have beautiful, meaningful, deep romantic and platonic relationships with other characters. If you like a book that elegantly explores a variety of themes, I would say this one focuses quite a bit on internal strength, on women's place in society, on bodily autonomy and the ability to choose your own fate, and grief. There's a lot of loss and processing of grief throughout the book, and for me personally, currently having recently, earlier this week, lost a family member, I was really moved by the way that Samantha Shannon wrote about grief and loss in this book. I found it quite cathartic and healing in a way. So if those themes sound interesting to you and you like dragons and you like beautiful writing and this really epic, beautifully constructed world, I think you'll love this book, and also The Priory of the Orange Tree as well. So that, I think, is all I have to say in the non-spoilery section for this, but I do have some spoilery thoughts to share. So spoilers starting now, skip ahead if you're going to read this book, and you should. Okay, spoilers for A Day of Fallen Night. I knew Wolf was Tunova's son. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I told you I knew it. I knew it. And again, I'm sure people are going to say, yeah, that was very obvious. Stop getting so excited about figuring out obvious twists. But I'm still proud. And I love that they got to meet, and I love their relationship. I love how proud Wolf was to be Tunova's son. I love how proud Tunova was of who Wolf had grown to be and how kind and gentle he was while still being this really accomplished warrior, essentially. And I loved that we got a little bit of a development between Siu and Wolf as siblings. That's not something I expected, but I really loved that added connection. Shannon implied that Siu might be a point of view character in the next book, so I would love to see more of Wolf and Siu's dynamic. But I knew that that was going to happen, and I'm so happy. I was also really hoping that Wolf would end up being bisexual so that he could return Thrit's interest, because Thrit was such a sweet, wholesome, lovely guy, and he was clearly in love with Wolf for a very long time. All of the tender, stroking of a cheek and just being there for him no matter what, and, tender looks and hints here and there, and Wolf was so oblivious. And finally they kissed, and Wolf figured it out, and they ended up getting together, and I'm so happy. And the little scene of Wolf wanting to make things official and bringing Thrit to the place where they first met, and being clumsy and falling down and kind of making a mess of things, but still doing this sort of big romantic gesture for Thrit, and Thrit just being so giddy and excited, and them planning a future together. I'm gonna cry. It was so cute. I love them together. They're like the most wholesome couple of all time. And I feel like it's a nice counterpoint to some of the other romantic relationships in the story, like Esbar and Tunava, who have a very wholesome and loving relationship in many ways, but also have a little bit more of a fiery dynamic, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Esbar in particular has some harsher, sharper edges, I would say. And so their dynamic is a little different. Plus, they are in sort of the golden years of their life. They've been together for 30 years, which is also really fun to get to enjoy characters who are middle-aged women and still totally badass and in the prime of their life, but also to see an enduring love, to see what love looks like when people have been together for 30 years instead of the romantic arc finishing when they finally get together or when they get married at the end and then, they ride off into the sunset. I love that we get to just see that their story doesn't end when they get married or they make a commitment to each other or they kiss for the first time. It's a continued effort. It's a continued choice, that love is a choice that they make every day, and they recommit to each other and they learn how to sort of fit their love around their changing selves and their changing life and circumstances. I just think that's beautiful. I also predicted that Canthi was evil and probably had something to do with Wolf's disappearance, and she appears to be, if not evil, at least willing to do evil things to reach the ends that she has decided must be reached. She truly believes that the ends justify the means, and even if she thinks the ends are necessary and she, is doing them with good intentions, which is questionable, her means are, I would say, evil. And she did, in fact, kidnap Wolf and murder Wolf's biological father and leave Tunava grieving for 20 plus years, which is a pretty terrible and evil thing to do. I knew she was evil. I knew it. I also knew that she was the reason why Siu's partner, why the man she fell in love with and got pregnant by, was murdered. I knew that she somehow tricked the sisters or impersonated the prioress or something, and I was right. I just knew it. She was giving evil vibes from the start, so I'm proud of myself. Again, probably very obvious and probably not that interesting that I guessed it, but I'm still feeling proud of myself, okay? I love when my theories prove correct. It makes me feel like a detective. I grew up with the influence of Nancy Drew, so that is important to my sense of self. But anyway, I love the little hint at the end that Dumai might not actually be dead, and I would love to see Dumai come back in the next book in her new capacity as the maiden officiant and her working with Nikea as the warrior queen of Seiki to make the world a better place and to protect Seiki from the next rising of the worms and other creatures. Samantha Shannon mentioned in the interview at the end of the audiobook that she wanted the line of queens, of which Sabrin and Glorian are two, to be an extreme version of a hereditary monarchy where there is a single queen who has a single daughter, and that's it in perpetuity. And so there's no other option for someone else to take on the mantle. You can never step down and pass that responsibility on to someone else. You must rule and you must give birth because your daughter is next and there's no other option. So I think that really ties very well into, the themes of bodily autonomy and motherhood and expectations of women to be mothers or to want to be mothers. And I liked how there were so many prominent female characters in the book and a wide variety of attitudes towards motherhood. So I just found that really interesting that we got to see so many different takes on motherhood, so many different ways to be a woman and to handle motherhood or, choose to be or not to be a mother. And then if you are a mother, how you conceptualize that, how you feel about that. I thought that was really interesting, and it's not really something that I have seen done all that often in a single book, to see so many different attitudes towards motherhood. So I found that really interesting. I think that's it for the spoilers. There were a couple other things that she mentioned in the interview at the end of the audiobook that I found really fascinating. I would recommend, if you do read this book, to get a copy of the audiobook, even if you just manage to get it from your library, so that you can listen to that interview at the end, because I think it adds a lot of really interesting context for the book. But anyways, clearly I'm just going on and on because I really loved this, but I kid you not, my hands hurt so much from holding this book up for the last half hour. So I'm going to stop talking about this. 5 stars for Day of Fallen Night. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And now with that, we have come to the final book for this video, which I must admit I already started. Technically, I finished A Day of Fallen Night not yesterday, but the day before, and scheduling conflicts meant that I couldn't film my update, so I got a little excited and I started Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. I am about a quarter of the way through. I'm on page 111, so not too far through, not quite ready for an update yet, but I think I will get to the halfway point later this afternoon or tonight, and then I can come and let you know my thoughts for the first half. But I'm very excited to read The Parable of the Talents because The Parable of the Sower was such an interesting read to me, not only in that it was a very different take on a post-apocalyptic world. It's a near future post-apocalyptic world, sci-fi, where, society is crumbling and climate change, it has progressed to the point where people are struggling to get the resources they need, basic needs being met, and that's causing people to resort to some pretty heinous violence. And the whole thing is sort of tied together with this religion of Earthseed that the protagonist has created or is creating over the course of the book, and her conceptualization of God. This first book was really good, heart-wrenching, very violent, very disturbing at times, very upsetting, but also incredibly relevant and prescient. This was written in the 90s and set in the 2020s. And, we're not quite there in terms of society totally falling apart and climate change having progressed to the extreme level that it does in this book, but we're not far off. And that is terrifying. And Octavia E. Butler predicted so many things about the 2020s correctly from 30 years ahead, which was mind-blowing to read in this book. And again, I'm not going to say too much about this one yet, but I'm just going to say there is more of Butler predicting the future in a very uncanny and unsettling way. You'll see. We'll talk about it. Anyway, I'm going to go off and keep reading Parable of the Talents until the 50% mark, and then I'll be back here and I will unzip my lips and share my thoughts. So, see you soon. I've now finished 50% of Parable of the Talents, a little bit more than 50%, and I'm not surprised. I tried to mentally prepare myself going into it, but this book is really hard. It's really hard to read. Parable of the Sower was really hard to read. So again, I was forewarned, but so many terrible things happen in these books. So much pain and violence and suffering and loss. It's really, really rough to read. And this book has an added heavy sprinkling of religious bigotry, religious oppression, and abuse committed in the name of religion. You know, it's bad enough to read about the bad things that happen in this book, but when they're being done ostensibly in the name of God, it just makes it so much worse because the hypocrisy is off the charts. It's so hard to stomach. I would definitely, I mean, I'm not done this yet, obviously, but as it stands right now, I would recommend this series very heavily to just about anyone. I think that it reveals a lot about our current society that I think too many of us are willfully ignorant to, and very clearly shows where we're heading if we don't stop what is already starting to happen in our society in multiple avenues, you know, politically, socially, in terms of religion, climate change. Butler is very good at taking a hard look at where we are as a society, and she was doing this in the 90s, and then turning her eyes forward and thinking to herself, where are we going to end up if we keep going this way? And, you know, she's not that far off. And that is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to read a book that feels like it's showing a vision of our future that is not unrealistic and is horrifying. I highly recommend these books. I think they are very well written. I think they're very impactful, but they're certainly incredibly difficult to read. And this is one that I would very much recommend checking out trigger warnings ahead of time. I wouldn't say that a lot of the violence and pain and torture and suffering is all that graphic, but there is a lot of it, and it's very, very hard to stomach. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't say that I am enjoying the process of reading this. It's not a fun book, but I am finding it intellectually stimulating. I am finding it prescient and observant and compelling with quick-witted, sharp commentary. And Butler continues to predict the future in a way that is a little unsettling. There is a presidential candidate who talks about making America great again. This was written in 1998, and Octavia E. Butler sadly passed before Trump was elected, but she saw it coming very clearly. And, you know, in 1998, I was 6. So do I really clearly remember what American politicians were saying as a 6-year-old in Canada? Not really. But to my mind, I don't remember that line, "Make America Great Again," being said in the 90s and 2000s. So I asked my parents, and my dad confirmed that no, American politicians were not saying "Make America Great Again" in the 90s or 2000s, because at that time, they thought America was still great. Very much fits with my perception of how American politicians were talking about America in my childhood as I was growing up. It's just mind-blowing to me that Butler, writing these books in the 90s in America, was able to look at the current state of affairs and imagine how things would progress in 2 or 3 decades, and for it to be so accurate in so many ways. I don't know. It's a little wild, and it does make me, and it makes me even more sad than I already was that Octavia Butler passed in the early 2000s, because I would have loved to hear what she had to say about so many of her predictions coming true. I would have loved to read her take on where the world is headed from today's perspective. I just can't imagine the things she would be able to produce if she were still around and still able to cast her analytical eye to our social and political climate of the day. So very relevant, very confronting and thought-provoking. I'm finding this sort of new take on Lauren from the first book, instead of it being entirely sort of her perspective, getting some reflection from her daughter and her daughter's impression of her mother. We get to see her from this new perspective that I find very fascinating. I think a major difference between Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents is that religion sort of takes on a new role in the story than it did in the first book. In the first book, religion, we do get a little bit of Lauren's background with growing up with a Baptist preacher as a father. And then most of the book, when we're looking at religion, we're looking at her development of Earthseed, sort of this new religion, and her musings on religion and her sort of thinking about the world and trying to find these truths and compile them. And so religion is looked at in a more neutral, possibly even positive way in this book. Whereas in this book, we still see Earthseed. We see how Earthseed has progressed since the first book and continues to develop. Earthseed is definitely presented in a mostly neutral to positive light, although there there are some naysayers and we do get some sort of opposing opinions. But we also get the introduction of much more radical, extreme Christianity sort of taking over the country, and this religious fervor and religious oppression and abuse and slavery and torture, all in the name of sort of re-educating people and helping them to find God. And it's very disturbing to read. I feel pretty neutral about religion on the whole. I think religion can be used for good and it can also be used for bad. I think that religion is dangerous because it's very easy to use religion as justification to do just about anything, including some really terrible, terrible things. But I don't think that religion itself is inherently bad. Religion can cause people to do things that otherwise they would not necessarily do because it's able to convince them that it's the only right thing, and that sort of religious fervor and that blind faith can become destructive and an obsession and extreme and very harmful. So watching that happen is really hard to watch. It's really uncomfortable. And I think because of the current state of the world, and yeah, it's something that I worry about. So yeah, I'm not having fun reading this at all. And I'm struggling with it. And I keep sort of having to push myself to continue because I keep having this urge to put it down and not be confronted with what this book is confronting readers with. But it's also important and relevant and valuable, I think, to read and process and think about. And reading something like this and having that cautionary tale, maybe it will cause us to be more proactive and to hopefully stop this kind of a future from coming to pass. I don't know, but it's hard to read. So I'll do a short spoiler section. I don't have a huge amount to say that's spoilery, but spoilers starting. Yeah, all I really have to say is that it's really painful to watch characters that we grew to love in the first book lose their lives so needlessly in this book. Zara and Menkole are the two that it's just, their deaths were so pointless. They died for nothing, and it's just rage-inducing. It makes me so viscerally angry to read about characters losing their lives in such a way. And then the hypocrisy of the Christian missionaries who are enslaving this group of people and trying to re-educate them into Christianity and forcing all this deep misogyny on them and trying to oppress them. Just the hypocrisy of the way that they are torturing and enslaving and assaulting these people while preaching Christianity and acting like they're doing it for a good reason. It's so disgusting and disturbing, and it makes me so angry. So that's all I have to say. I'm like, this book is making me so angry, which just reinforces how well written it is and how important I think it is, because getting people angry is a great way to get them to actually care and to actually take action on things, to vote, to make their voices heard. But it's not pleasant. It's not a nice feeling. So if that's not a ringing endorsement, I don't know what is. I would still recommend this, at least so far, where I am 50% of the way through. But I could understand why someone watching this would be like, yeah, I'm good. That doesn't sound fun to read. It's really not. But I'm going to get going. I feel like I've been ranting for a while, and I'm just going to go finish this, and then I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts on the whole book. Because now I'm a little worked up. I feel like I need to go sit outside with my eyes closed, listening to the birds chirping to center myself again before I can keep reading. So, talk to you soon. Hey, I just finished Parable of the Talents and I feel a little drained, emotionally drained, but in a good way, sort of. This was very good. It was very good, and it 100% deserves 5 stars, but it is 5 stars in a very different way that the other books I read for this video are 5 stars. Not only is the larger story and sort of the exploration of what our world is becoming and all of the religious bigotry and abuse and violence and just all of the sort of larger political and social and religious themes and events of this novel are really intense and difficult to read about. But then the individual human story of Lauren and her daughter, Larkin, is almost more heartbreaking. I had a different impression at the start of the novel of what their relationship was like and how much time they were able to spend together. I'm trying not to spoil anything, but it just turns out that I was wrong, and the reality of their relationship and what was done to them individually, sort of separately, and also sort of as a unit of mother and daughter, and what was done to their relationship is heartbreaking. I don't know how else to put it. It's devastating. And the ending was not as depressing as I expected it to be, which is something. There was definitely a lot more hope than I thought we were going to get. But yeah, I feel that was a lot. So I'm a little dazed. Can you tell? Still an absolutely fantastic book. I think this might be the most tabs I've ever used while reading. This book had a lot to say. A lot of political, social commentary, a lot of commentary on religion in a variety of ways. I don't feel like I overdid it, to be honest. I feel like I really tabbed things that were relevant and then I might want to look at again. It just so happens that this is a very tightly packed novel. So I just checked, and this is, in fact, the shortest book I read for this video, but I am almost certain this is the most tabs I used. Maybe it could be rivaled by A Day of Fallen Night, but A Day of Fallen Night is 2 times the length. So yeah, I just feel like this was so tightly plotted. I wouldn't even say it's fast-paced necessarily. It is pretty slow to medium in its pacing, but even though the plot itself was not necessarily progressing at a very quick pace, there was so much packed into every single page. And I feel like every other paragraph, there was some insightful comment or little nugget of wisdom or observation that just blew my mind a little bit. So I felt like I had to keep tabbing everything, and I don't regret it. Not one bit. You can judge me all you want, but I feel good about my life choices. So yeah, this was heartbreaking, devastating, terrifying, disturbing, upsetting, harrowing, and also fantastic and brilliant, and 100% gets 5 stars, which means somehow I have made a reading vlog where every book I read in it got 5 stars, which is amazing. I feel like there are people out there who thought this day would never come. I think that's all I can say about this without spoilers, so I'm going to move into a spoiler section for Parable of the Talents, but do stick around because I'm going to try to rank the 4 books I read for this video, which, even as I just said it, I started to wonder if that was a good choice because they're all amazing and I'm gonna suffer, I think. But I think it's a fun way to end this video. Who doesn't love watching someone else suffer trying to pick a favorite out of things that they love, right? So I'll do that after this. But spoilers for Parable of the Talents. I hate Marcus with a burning passion. What is wrong with him? He is actually the worst. I didn't like him when he first showed up, and I thought maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I just need to give him a chance. I think I'm being uncharitable. He's been through a lot, and he has been through a lot, but he's also a total asshole, and also so enamored with the idea of being respected as a pastor that he doesn't care that the organization he has dedicated his life to is murdering, torturing, raping, stealing children, just generally being the embodiment of evil on earth. And then he essentially steals Lauren's child and doesn't tell either of them that the other one is alive and keeps them apart for years and years and years. What a scumbag. I actually hate him so much. terrible, terrible. And, you know, it's hard to blame her because of what she's been through and also her experience of what Marcus did to her, sort of stealing her relationship with her mom away from her. And then also kind of because she already loves him and he is her only family, she is inclined to believe him and to side with him and trust him. She views her mother through the worst possible lens at every moment. She cannot believe that her mother actually loved her, ever tried to find her, cares about her at all, doesn't understand how her mother could be totally heartbroken and devastated by learning that her own brother kept her child from her for decades and let her daughter believe that she was dead when she was right there and they were in contact. Like, just zero empathy. And I noticed this at the start. I was thinking, you know, she is categorizing her mother a certain way, which feels very harsh. And then we go into her mother's diary entries and she's directly opposing the things that Larkin is saying, you know, expressing her love of her child and, you know, how shocked she was by how much she loved her child, how much she wanted her, how excited she was to have this family. And then, you know, for years, how much she missed her and how devastated she was and how she didn't know she could live without her and she needed to find her. And Larkin just keeps going on and on like, oh, well, you know, she didn't ever need me. She didn't love me. She didn't care about me. You know, Earthseed is her only real child or her first and most important child. And like, again, Larkin went through a lot. Her childhood was terrible on every level. She endured abuse that no child should ever endure. And on the one hand, I can understand how that would be sort of a protective mechanism psychologically that her brain would employ to protect her. But still, she's kind of the worst. And I feel so bad for Lauren, even though Earthseed flourished in a way that she could have only dreamed of and her life had purpose and meaning and she found community and family. She also lost her husband and all her siblings and her parents and her daughter and never really got them back. And that is devastating, not even including all of the abuse and pain she suffered herself. I am really happy that the book ended the way it did. I feel like I needed that little bit of hope, and the fact that Earthseed has found success, has backers who have money and are willing to support the cause, and that they are, you know, building schools and helping to educate children. And I think that's really beautiful. And I love that in the end, even though Lauren passed before she could go to the stars, that she saw members of her community go to the stars, even if it's not the full fulfillment of their destiny, but it's the first major step, and that her remains will join them and be used to fertilize a tree and kind of continue that cycle of life. I found that very beautiful, and I got quite emotional at the end there, both because I was heartbroken for her having her relationship with her daughter stolen by Marcus, and I was so pissed off at Marcus for that. I was really getting angry and upset. And then the ending was really beautiful and hopeful, and so I had this really like roiling mixed emotions, tearing up, feeling so many intense things at once reaction, which I think is the sign of a really incredibly crafted novel. So I think that's it for spoilers, and I think that's all I have to say about Parable of the Talents. I'm sure over time, as it soaks in more, as I have more time to think about it and let things percolate, I will be more coherent. But this was really fantastically done, just brilliant. And all I can do is give it 5 stars and highly recommend it and Parable of the Sower to all of you. So that is what I will do. So that brings us to the end of this video. I've finished 4 incredible books, 4 incredible sequels, well, really 2 prequels and 2 sequels, 2 books that I loved and also gave 5 stars. This is like a love fest for books that are incredible. I am so happy that I did this video, and I'm so glad that y'all were here with me. And I think the perfect way to finish this is to try to put these in order of my favorite to my still favorite, but slightly less. So I can't hold this up. It's so heavy. Oh my God. Okay, one second. Oh, and just for fun, hang on. All my tabs. So satisfying. I actually don't know if I can do this. One second. This is sorting favorites among favorites. All 4 of these are probably going to be in my top favorite reads for the entire year, possibly for my lifetime. Like, these are up there, 5 stars each. Incredible, amazing. I love them all. But if I had to put them in order, this is what I would do. For a fun game, before I show you, leave in the comments what your guess is for how I would rank these from favorite to still favorite, but slightly less incredible. But here is how I would rank them. Parable of the Talents is on the top, then A Day of Fallen Night, then The Angel's Game, then Ocean's Echo. Again, this is ranking 5-star books against 5-star books. They're all great, but in terms of how deeply they affected me and the themes and how much they made me think and how insightful I felt they were and how engaged I was and how riled up I got and how bereft I felt at the end, this is how I would rank them. So we'll see in the comments if y'all got it right. I feel like you might have been able to tell, but I'm curious. So that's it. Those are the 4 sequels. That was quite the video to produce. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I'm sure it is a monster and so long, so if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I appreciate you. You are the best. Leave some sort of emoji in the comments that you feel represents the vibe of this video or of these books. You can use multiple emojis if you need to, but I'm curious for you. What emojis make you think of these books and or this video as a whole? Leave those down below so I know that you made it all the way to the end and you are one of those few people who watch all the way through, because y'all really are the best. I appreciate you. Like this video if you enjoyed it, because a lot of time and effort has gone into it, and subscribe if you haven't already, because if you're still here and you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what's going on with you, but I feel like you should join because I feel like you're my people. And again, if you have read books that you feel are similar to any of these, remind you of any of these, please leave them down below because I need more books like these in my life. If I could only ever read books that I loved as much as the 4 books I read in this video, I would be a very happy person. So please share those with me if you have any. Thank you again to Kitsch for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box and or use my code to get 25% off your first order. And with that, I am finally gonna get going. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you really, really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.